few months ago, I answered the question once and for all. What is your favourite musical character's favourite musical? I told you the favourite musical of Matilda, Elphaba, Elle Woods, but still, there are more musical characters who we must find out their favourite musical. And because that video was so fun, we're doing it again. Welcome back to your favourite musical character's favourite musical, where I do exactly what it says on the tin. Let's go. But if you haven't seen my face before, hi, I'm Ellie. I talk about theatre. I am the most chaotic theatre person on the internet. I do reviews, I do discussions, I do versus brackets, rankings, game shows, and whatever this is. And if any of that sounds interesting to you, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me, it helps out the channel. But let's talk about your favourite musical character's favourite musical. Now, just as a disclaimer, this is part 2. You don't have to watch part 1 first, because they're quite standalone, but obviously I'm not going to repeat any characters. So if your favourite musical character is any of these guys, they're not gonna be here. You could go watch the first part, but you can watch this one first if you really want to, or you could leave this one and go watch that one first and then come back, but that feels needlessly complicated. I once again asked you on Instagram, go follow me on Instagram, for your favourite musical characters. I made a list of all the ones that weren't repeated, and we're going to explore them one by one by one. We're going to start with Lafayette. You know him, you love him, he's from Hamilton, baby. Now, Lafayette, it's very obvious. I think the choice for Lafayette is very obvious. Not just because he is French, but also because he's a revolutionary. Because he's someone who fights for what is right. And because of that, I feel like the obvious choice for Lafayette's favorite musical is Les Mis. Now, the only question is, obviously, that is a revolution that didn't go well. That is a revolution where they didn't succeed. But I feel like Lafayette would have a lot of respect, would really heed the tale, and really mourn the loss of life in that musical. I feel like it's a musical that would really drive him as a person. I feel like he would treasure it. I feel like he's also the type of character who would really appreciate a lot of the character journeys in that show. From someone like Jean Valjean, from someone like Fontaine, from Eponine. I just feel like it's a very obvious choice. And, you know, sometimes the obvious choice is the correct choice. I feel like it's very obvious that Lafayette would love Les Mis. And that's not just because he's French. I promise you, I didn't just give him a French musical because he is French. The Phantom of the Opera. Is it not in the name? I feel like it's quite obvious that the Phantom probably wouldn't be the biggest fan of, like, musical theatre. He'd like the more traditional set. He's not going to the Adelphi Theatre, he's going to the London Coliseum, okay? Well, not right now. I don't think the Phantom of the Opera would be very happy with the Great Gatsby musical, but hey, that's just me. So I'm trying to rack my brain. What is, like, the most operatic musical? What is the one that blurs the lines between the two to a point that's, like, okay enough where the Phantom would be fine with it? And I feel like it's probably going to be your Gilbert and Sullivan's. Like, your very operatic tones. Maybe something like HMS Pinafore, but I feel like that's a bit frivolous for him. Maybe something like the Mikado. I think there's definitely options there, but I'm trying to find something that's a bit more serious, because I feel like he would want, like, a massive comedic opera, and the problem is I don't really know enough about opera to suggest an opera. But hey, this is the fun part. If you guys do know anything about opera, you can go to the comments and be like, Ellie, you silly fool, why did you not think of this one very specific opera that you've never heard of? That would be perfect for Phantom. And then I would say you are also a fool, because that's not a musical. We need to strike that weird balance, the in-betweeny section of being an opera and a musical at the same time, which is kind of that weird sphere that Gilbert and Sullivan land into. So I'm just going to say any of their work. Whichever piece of their work is the most serious, there you go. Hi, Ellie in the edit here. I would like to give an alternate shout for Phantom, which is a musical like Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812, which has a lot of, like, rave influences, which maybe would turn Phantom off. But I think if I'm thinking about, like, operatic sounds in musical theatre, and, like, the ones that blur the lines, that's, like, the most modern thought process that came into my mind. I think Phantom would appreciate a lot of elements of the Great Comet, even if he wouldn't love everything about it. Ewan Montague from Operation Mincemeat. Listen, Ewan Montague is not a musicals fan. There is that one line in the show where he is being challenged on the fact that he has written a film about the case he's working, about the secret mission he's on, and what is his response? Well, at least it's not a bloody musical. Obviously, this is an in-joke. This is a bit of meta humour because you're watching a musical, but Ewan Montague, he's not a musical man. We know he buys theatre tickets, but do we think he's going to see musicals? No, he's probably more likely seeing plays. But if there is one musical that would be his favourite, and I'm breaking my self-imposed rules here, but the only musical that would keep Ewan Montague's attention long enough is the musical that he is in. Yes, his favourite musical would be Operation Mincemeat. There is nothing else. There is nothing else that Ewan Montague would like. This man has the biggest ego I have ever seen. So the musical... Okay. So the musical that would indeed keep his interest would be Operation Mincemeat. He would love that glitzy finale. He would love the show. He'd love how he's in it. He probably wouldn't even register the criticism that they levy towards him, but hey, the moral of the story matches him and his worldview, so that's fine. Charles Chumley, on the other hand, we can have some more fun. My first choice is The Lion King. I don't know. I can just picture Charles Chumley sitting at the Lyceum Theatre, big bucket of popcorn, uh, Disney merch on, just having the time of his life. He would love it. He would be living. When he sees all the puppets and the animals come out, oh my god, he's having the best time of his life. We know how much Charles Chumley loves animals. I mean, he wishes he was a tadpole or a maggot. He discovers a rare breed of trout, you know. He's an animal lover, and I feel like Lion King would be something he would really, really enjoy. He's a simple man with simple wants and needs, and that need is to see Lion King at the Lyceum Theatre. Mrs. Lovett, I adore this choice. Mrs. Lovett and Sweeney Todd, I think, would really love A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder. These are both musicals set in the Victorian period, with characters facing grisly ends. But whereas Sweeney as a character is a lot darker, he's a character who probably wouldn't love musical theatre, and that's why I don't really have a suggestion for him in any of these lists yet. If y'all have a great choice, let me know. But while Mrs. Lovett doesn't really shy away from that, she is a lot more bubbly. She's a lot more camp. And when I think of that, the blackness mixed with the campness, I don't think there's any musical that's more suited to that than A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder. A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder is this fairly silly musical, this musical comedy, where it's this Victorian man who realizes he's a part of this very rich family, but he's like 11th in line to actually inheriting anything. So one by one, he slowly kills his new family members in order to rise up the ranks. It's silly, it's goofy, all of the family members are played by the same person. I don't know, I feel like Mrs. Lovett would find that so silly and fun and camp. Alternate choice, which I've just thought of now, but it's not as good. Curious Case of Benjamin Button, because it's set in a seaside town, and as we all know, Mrs. Lovett loves the sea. Speaking of Benjamin Button, next up we have Benjamin Button. Now, Benjamin Button is someone who I feel like is more of a play person, but I feel like Benjamin Button, as like a great father, would love to take his children to the theatre. I can picture him, Lowen, and Lochran all going to see like the local community theatre in Cornwall. They'd be having a blast. But I think it's hard to assign like a musical that really fits his personality. My first thought was Come From Away, because I think that's a musical about a sense of kindness and community, and I think the style of Come From Away is the closest to the style of Benjamin Button, in that kind of folksy music that matches that. But I'm not entirely sold on that choice, because I feel like it's a musical that matches the musical more than Benjamin's character. If I'm thinking about Benjamin as a character, he's someone who lives his life being different. He kind of places himself as an outsider because that's what he's been taught. I could draw lines to musicals that I don't think match massively stylistically, or don't really feel like they're massive matches tonally, but he might be able to see himself within a character like Amelie from Amelie, or even musicals about social issues or injustices like Hairspray. I think if I'm going to choose one for him, I'd either say Come From Away or Amelie. But again, these are two shows that feel like they match the musical as a whole more than Benjamin himself. But I feel like they're the closest shouts. Beverly Bass. Beverly Bass from Come From Away is based on a real person, the pilot Beverly Bass. She was the first female pilot in the US, and yeah, we know on record that the real Beverly Bass, her favourite musical is Come From Away. But if we're speaking about the character within the musical and when it's set, Come From Away doesn't exist. And also it feels like a bit of a cheat, you know? If I was going to give a musical to Beverly Bass, I would probably give her something like Suffs, a musical about strong women, about the Suffs movement in America. I feel like that's a show that would really suit her. There's another show that would really suit her, but I'm going to instead give it to the main character in Suffs. But we'll speak about her in a little bit. Death becomes her. We are speaking about Madeline Ashton and Helen Sharp, who I think they would share a favourite musical. I think their favourite musical would be Chicago. It's a little dark, and we all know that Madeline Ashton and Helen, they're pushed to their limits. They do get a little bit dark as well. They are not shy of trying to off one another, and I feel like they would probably relate to Roxy. But more so, I feel like Madeline Ashton's favourite musical would be Chicago first, because she wants to play Roxy, and then Helen would also want to play Roxy, and then they would just be fighting over who would actually play Roxy, and it just ends up in fights and tension and conflict that furthers their relationship, because that's who Helen and Madeline are to each other. I feel like nothing sums up their relationship more than that, and that's such a perfect idea. That's their favourite musical. They have to consistently one-up each other. If I've learned anything from Death Becomes Her, it's that. The magical Mr. Mistopheles, the cat from Cats. I have not seen Cats in a very long time. I had a couple of different Cats suggestions. I can't remember many of them. Grisabella, she's the one who sings Memory. Cool. But the one I want to speak about is Mr. Mistopheles, because I feel like there's a very obvious musical for him. It's Pippin. The show literally starts with a song called Magic to Do. Are you kidding? That's Mr. Mistopheles' jam. That's his bread and butter, or his milk in his little bowl that he can lick up because he is a cat. At last we come to Alice Paul from Suffs, where I'm going to give the other suggestion that I feel like you could give Beverly Bass, but I'm going to give it specifically to Alice Paul here, and that is Ride. Ride is this beautiful little musical about the first woman to cycle the globe, and I feel like Annie in that musical and Alice Paul would probably really get along. They're both massively trailblazing women who are very determined to prove people wrong. They both have a certain level of ambition and drive behind them that I feel like if Alice was going to love any musical, I feel like she'd really, really find and see herself in that. We have our two main characters from Maybe Happy Ending. Oliver is just any jazz musical. I feel like there's not that many, so I mean, just take your pick. But some of these jazz musicals I feel like sway away from what Oliver would like, because Oliver is, he's sweet. So while something like Bonnie and Clyde is very jazzy, I think it's a little bit too dark for him. I feel like my suggestion would maybe be something like Bandstand. I think that musical has a lot of challenging moments and obviously deals with these men coming back from the war and how that massively affected them. But I feel like he would love a lot of that music. He's probably going to love any kind of jazz jukebox musical as well. But if I'm going to give you one choice, I feel like it's more interesting to give a non-jukebox musical. So let's go with Bandstand. Claire was much harder because she's quite defensive. She's got like a lot of barriers up. But I think the reason I'm going to give her this quite romantic musical is because I think the character dynamic between Oliver and Claire in Maybe Happy Ending is very similar to the character dynamic in this musical, and that is two strangers carry a cake across New York. I feel like Claire would see a lot of herself in Robin, I think she'd see a lot of Oliver in Dougal in that musical. And I'd like to also say, for the record, if I was picking a show for Robin, I would probably go for a very similar approach, where I would say that Robin's favorite musical would be maybe Happy Ending. Robin feels like someone who would appreciate something more artsy. So yeah, they can have a little swap. They can swap their musicals. It's very cute. I cannot tell you how many people asked very specifically for Starlight Express characters last time. I've picked 3 very specifically. If there's more you want next time, I'll do them next time. Rusty, he is a train, he is an underdog, he wants to win the competition, win the heart of Pearl. He has a very clear moral compass, and I feel like a lot of these character traits align with a lot of different underdog stories. I think if there's a musical that's really going to speak to him and really align himself with, I think it makes a lot of sense if it was something like Aladdin. Aladdin is scrappy, is doing things and breaking the law, but he's doing it for the right reasons. I think Rusty would relate a lot to the storyline there. I think Rusty would relate to his love for Princess Jasmine. I also think it makes a lot of sense for a show like Starlight Express that the choices of musicals kind of match the age range for Starlight Express. And you'll see with all of my choices, these are shows that do appeal to a slightly younger crowd as well. They're not all Disney, but there is one more Disney show. Because Greaseball, the jock, it's Hercules. Come on. She is someone who works very hard, appreciates her body. She sees herself as very strong and determined in places. And I feel like there's certain elements of Hercules she would very much relate to. The zero to hero storyline, the way that Hercules builds upon himself, the challenges he faces. I could see Greaseball appreciating a lot of that. Would she understand everything? Maybe not, but it seems like the type of musical that would be in her wheelhouse. Get it? Wheels? Trains? No. Moving on. Finally, Elektra. Elektra, I feel like they would really enjoy a musical that has electricity in it. Is this a really simple shout? Yes. I thought about Be More Chill, which is like the most kind of sci-fi musical I can think of, but I don't know, I don't think a lot of the character journeys in that show would very much match Elektra's vibe. So instead, I've tried to think of shows that are like very technological and very impressive within that. Maybe having cool effects, or maybe having some connection to technology in some way. And it felt like the obvious choice was Back to the Future. A little bit retro, a little bit 80s, going into the 60s. I feel like Elektra would probably watch that show and just be very pleased with the technology and how cool it is. I did consider a musical like Loserville as well, but it's just a show I don't really know loads and loads about, plot-wise. I know it's got a lot of links to technology. I know a lot of the characters are within, like, a technology company. That's pretty much all I know about Loserville, so I couldn't really give a decent comparison and a link to it. But yeah, Elektra, they just want something simple, and I feel like if there's cool effects and electricity being used well, they're gonna clap along and they're gonna have a great time. Hedwig from Hedwig and the Angry Inch. I feel like there's a lot of queer musicals you could give to Hedwig that they may relate to, but I also think Hedwig is someone who appreciates a lot of these legends. If you look at a song like Midnight Radio, there's a lot of dedications that Hedwig gives at the end. Here's the Patty and Tina and Yoko, Aretha, these icons and legends. And if you pick out one of those, you'll notice Tina Turner. So I feel like quite an obvious choice. I feel like Hedwig would have a level of appreciation for the Tina Turner musical. I think Tina Turner is someone who went through a lot of struggles through life, which the musical does a very good job at bringing you through, making you relate to, making you understand. And I feel like Hedwig is someone who has had a lot of struggles, who's had relationship struggles specifically, that you can draw certain lines to Tina's life with. I feel like that's what she would bring, and I feel like her favourite musical would have a lot to do with that and a lot to relate with. So I feel like the Tina Turner musical has the kind of double whammy there. The story she relates to and the artist that she loves and admires and appreciates. Someone who she would like to be as famous as one day. These strange rock and rollers, you know? And I also like that, because sometimes I feel like I'm very boxed into just giving the queer musicals to queer characters, as you'll see with our next one. But I like these moments where I can branch out a little bit and go, no, there's probably something else that they would appreciate. Lola, the drag queen, yep, she's getting the drag queen musicals. Just when I thought I broke the stereotype, I've gone back into it. I do think Lola would like something like everybody's talking about Jamie. Lola is someone who has struggled a lot with her relationship with her father and her family, people not quite understanding or not quite appreciating who she is. And I feel like these are very similar struggles that Jamie goes through in that musical. I think this is a situation where in the last video I spoke about Jamie. I was like, I feel like Jamie would very much relate to Lola's story. I think vice versa is also the same here. Another music I feel like Lola would enjoy, because Lola, she feels like someone who would maybe enjoy some of the classic musicals more than the modern ones like Jamie. I feel like she might enjoy something like Lacage at Falls. Big, flashy, camp, a lot of queer struggles within that as well. It feels like a bit of a no-brainer for Lola. Honestly, give her anything slightly camp and she'd have a great time. She's someone who I would not be surprised if she knows her musical theatre, you know? Michael in the bathroom. Michael from Be More Chill. What do we know about Michael Mel? He's a teenager, he's a little bit nerdy, he loves video games, a lot of these being slightly horror-themed, Apocalypse of the Damned, you know? He feels like a bit of an outsider and a loner. So I feel like there's a couple of musicals you could relate to that. I feel like a very obvious suggestion, and a musical that a lot of people who love something like Be More Chill also love, is something like Dear Evan Hansen. A musical about an outsider who struggles, who makes mistakes. A musical about the difficulty of navigating high school, especially when you are neurodivergent. I feel like there's a lot of lines that you can draw between these two characters and these two stories that make it quite a fair choice. But if you want to lean into more of like the campness and the horror theme and the general likes of this character, I feel like he would appreciate Little Shop of Horrors. That kind of campy, silly, horror-themed musical. Can you tell me that you can't picture Michael Mel wanting to play a character like Seymour? And yes, the person who played Michael Mel originated the role has also played Seymour, so I mean, the casting is there. But like that kind of B-movie style of Little Shop of Horrors, I feel like speaks a lot to what I know about the character of Michael. His likes and his interests and his style, how he holds himself. I feel like Little Shop of Horrors is the choice I would personally go with. These two characters could not be more different, but I'm going to give them the same musical. I'm going to start with the character you're going to be like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then I'm going to go to the character you're going to be like, Ellie, what are you smoking? What are you doing? Why on earth would this character ever like this musical? And then I'm going to try and justify it, okay? Jenna from Waitress. I feel like she would really love 9 to 5. She is a woman who is in quite an abusive situation. She is a woman who is struggling to stand up for herself, especially with a baby on the way. She knows that she needs to escape the relationship she's in, and she seeks comfort through an affair. An affair that she knows that she probably shouldn't be going through with, but it's what's getting her through. She eventually finds the strength and the power to stand up when she finally has her child and she has someone to defend and protect. And I feel like a lot of the themes of Waitress match the themes of 9 to 5, which I honestly found it very fitting that these two musicals were playing literally across the street from each other. 9 to 5 is a musical all about women standing up for themselves, managing to get the upper hand on a creepy boss, and managing to create a better work environment for them and for the other women within there. It's about a group of tight-knit women, 3 very tight-knit women, who all support each other emotionally, and I think you can definitely draw certain parallels to those 3 and the 3 main characters in Waitress. A Jenna, a Becky, and a Dawn feel very similar to a Doralee, a Violet, and the other one. Oh my god, what's her name? It's a J name. It's definitely a J name. Jodie! It's Jodie. Oh boy, I've clearly not seen 9 to 5 in a little while. Oh boy, it has been about 5 years, okay? But my other choice for someone who would actually really like 9 to 5, and give me a chance, don't click away. I promise you, I can justify it. Fontaine from Les Mis. Okay, I can hear you now. In what world does that match Fontaine? But Fontaine is a character who is kind of beaten down by a lot of men around her. We hear through the events of I Dreamed a Dream how men have kind of beaten her down, how she was taken advantage of, how these men have left her. You see that in the boss at the factory as well, with his terrible breath and his wandering hands, and what she thinks that Jean Valjean, as the mayor, has done to her as well. Left her to one side, allowed the factory member to push her out. Everything she's doing it for her daughter, and the men within this world are hindering that. And I feel like she has a lot of emotional baggage within that. So I feel like if Fontaine could see a musical where the women manage to stand up, where the women manage to have a much stronger voice, I feel like that would be quite revolutionary for her. I feel like that was something she really would appreciate. I know it's quite an odd choice stylistically, especially because Les Mis is very, like, got so much gravitas, and 9 to 5 is a lot more commercial. But I feel like a lot of the themes of Fontaine's story are things that she would appreciate and could draw lines to the stories of the women in 9 to 5. I feel like the women in 9 to 5 are things that she wished she could be if she was born into a slightly different world. Is it a strange choice? Yes, I'll give you that. But honestly, I like that justification. Honduras, are you surprised when I tell you I'm going to give him a musical about a revolution? But if the one in Les Mis did not work, if the one in Les Mis struggled to hit its stride and get off the ground, I feel like he's going to want to look to a revolution that actually worked. Maybe something a little bit simpler. I'm going to say that Honduras would really appreciate and like Newsies. Again, I think there's something to speak about the age of them. This strike in France was a bunch of schoolboys. They were young. They were fighting for what they believed in, yes. But there's also a certain level of naivety to them. And I feel like another musical about a revolution happening from young men would be something Honduras would very much relate to, very much appreciate. And I feel like he's someone who would want to really root for them and stand up for them. And when he sees them actually manage to negotiate, to find a better world for themselves, I feel like that's something he would really love to see. The world that he would much rather be in. You know? Have I justified this one? I feel like I maybe have. So while it feels like a bit of an obvious choice, you know, one musical about a strike and a revolution to another musical about a strike and a revolution, I feel like these two have a lot of lines that cross together, a lot of overlap within the characters they're presenting and their worldview and what they're fighting for, that I feel like Honduras would really relate to. R.I.P. Melchior Gabor from Spring Awakening. You would have really loved Sing Street. Melchior is a character who's pushing for a better world, a freer world. He's someone who is diving into a lot of this writing that the people around him, especially his parents and the other adults in this world, don't quite understand and think is very radical. But to a modern audience, we see it as very normal. The idea of girls and boys learning in school together, the sexuality that he feels, and how he embraces that. And how, despite these things he's doing being natural, being normal, it's shunned and he's demonized for it. So you kind of want another musical that has a similar level of angst. You want another musical about people kind of standing up for a world that they believe in and a future that they believe in. And I feel like Sing Street is maybe not like the perfect one-to-one, but is another musical about young people finding their voice. And especially has a very similar musical style to Spring Awakening. I think a lot of Connor's story in Sing Street has a lot of one-to-one parallels to someone like Melchior Gabor. There's obviously the romance he feels there, there's the angst towards parental figures, to teachers, there's a lot of his relationship, the tumultuous relationship with the priest, the head of this school, who's kind of belittling and tormenting Connor a bit. I feel like Melchior is a character who would very much fight against that and would see the injustice within it. There's a lot of parallels you can draw to these two musicals, both being coming-of-age stories. We spoke about Hermes last time from Hadestown, but I have a good shout for The Fates. Now, I wanted a musical that had a tragic ending, because The Fates, their whole deal is fate, basically. Their whole job and goal within the musical of Hadestown is to guide towards this foregone conclusion. They are representations of that doubt, of the inevitability of the ending. And so I feel like you want to give them a musical that has similar vibes. And I think the closest I can think of is Blood Brothers. Now, I will go on record and saying I'm not the biggest fan of Blood Brothers, but if there is a musical that has a very similar theme of this course of events, of this domino effect leading to this conclusion, that's very similar to something like Hadestown, it is Blood Brothers. That ending is kind of signed for by the start. The character of the narrator kind of taking up a very similar role in that musical to the characters of the Fates. You think of stuff like Devil's Got Your Number and the little weird pieces of rhyming that he does, the kind of ominous warnings that he gives to the characters. And you can, like, literally, it's like a one-to-one comparison, basically. I feel like the Fates would love that. They'd eat that up. And they love a bit of a tragic ending. Let's go. Oh, oh, Pierre, from Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812. I have a really... I'm proud of this shout for Pierre. But let's analyse his character first. He's someone who is very depressed. He feels a bit useless in his place in life. His friends are off fighting in this war that he's not a part of. He's lonely, he feels like he doesn't really have a place, and he starts to come into his own and realise his place in life when he helps Natasha, becoming more of a guiding hand in this community. Do you know a character I feel like Pierre would quite relate to? Is someone like Tevye. I feel like Pierre would really like Fiddler on the Roof. Obviously, it's quite a bleak musical, especially with the ending of Fiddler on the Roof, but I feel like a lot of that would really speak to Pierre. He's someone who is very intelligent, very scholarly, but also I feel like you can look at the journey Pierre goes on and the person he becomes towards the end of that musical and see a lot of that within Tevye. I love Tevye as a character. He's someone who is challenged consistently on his views and his traditions, and there's places where he changes because of his love, and then you get to see the moments where he flat refuses to do so. The daughters that he can change for and a daughter that he can't. And the emotional toll that takes on her. It's a musical with a lot of challenges. It's a musical with a lot of really dark material and really sad moment that I feel like would really touch Pierre and really affect him deeply. The Witch from Into the Woods. I think a lot of my choice links to the song Last Midnight. I love this song. I think it's a very clear definition of how the witch sees herself and her character throughout this musical. There's a talks about the blame. Find if that's the thing you enjoy, placing the blame. If that's the aim, give me the blame. It's also that verse that comes after as well. You're so nice. You're not good, you're not bad, you're just nice. I'm not good, I'm not nice, I'm just right. And it's that very clear worldview that I feel like the way that she views herself, I feel like she would probably really appreciate Wicked. Now, I know that seems very obvious. The misunderstood witch musical for the witch who sees herself as misunderstood. But I think if you really look into the way that the witch sees herself, sees her duty, sees her morals, and that worldview that she has, I feel like it lines quite well to how Elphaba is presented in a musical like Wicked. How the world outside perceives her and what she's really like. And while I don't think the witch is as morally sound as Elphaba is, there's a lot within her character that she does see herself as that. I'm not good, I'm not nice, I'm just right. That's why I feel like she would really appreciate Wicked. And let's end out this video. I did this kind of last time, but I did a whole section just on the 6 queens. Let's do some Heather's characters. Now, I'm going to start with Martha. Martha Dunstock. Because I think her favourite musical does not exist yet. Right now, they are developing a Princess Bride musical. And the second that is released, oh boy, Martha is going to go crazy. She is going to be living her best life. She is going to be there in that theatre every single night. She is going to see it 200 times. She's going to be the biggest fan. If Martha Dunstock was around today, she would be a clear and huge fangirl for this musical. She's a sucker for a happy ending. I think in that case, there's other musicals with happy endings that we could give to Martha. Something like Starlight Express would probably really appease her. I feel like quite a simple musical is stuff that she'd really, really enjoy. I feel like Martha Dunstock would probably really like something like Warrior of Man, or, you know, like something quite commercial. A Mamma Mia, something feel good and joyful, you know? that feels like Martha Dunstock's bag. Heather Chandler, there was a couple of different musicals I thought of. I considered Clueless, but I felt like the moral standpoint of Cher in that musical is a bit too defined for a character like Heather Chandler. So instead, I've given her The Devil Wears Prada, a musical about quite complex characters, a lot of big personalities that I feel like she would quite appreciate. Heather Duke, really simple. It's the exact same musical that Heather Chandler has as her favourite. If it ever changes, her favourite is changing too. That girl absolutely lives in Chandler's shadow. So whatever is her choice, whatever Chandler says her favourite musical is, that's what Heather Duke is picking. Heather McNamara, I feel like she'd like something quite simple. A little bit cheesy, a little bit silly, a little bit fun. Maybe a Legally Blonde, you know? I don't think she's fussy. I don't think so. And finally, Veronica Sawyer. Oh my god, Veronica. Now, Veronica is someone who is very intelligent. She's very smart. She's a little bit wise for her years. She's someone who's quite ready to move on. So it feels like she would appreciate a musical that is quite intelligent. I would pitch maybe something like Hamilton. I feel like she'd probably really appreciate that show lyrically, and a lot of the artistry of that show and what goes into it. But I think the other thing that we can take from Veronica is a lot of her worldview. I think if you look through Heather's, there's a lot of very clear moral standpoints that Veronica takes, especially around people growing and changing. They were just 17, they still had room to grow. While she's taking the bomb onto the football field, she's standing by it. She's saying, I believe that everyone can be a good person. So I'm trying to think of different musicals about goodness in humanity, about these moments and these characters who have certain changes and really become better people, because that feels like the ideal world that Veronica wants to live in. Maybe a musical about a tragedy that is changed into something more positive, like A Come From Away. Maybe a musical where the characters go on big journeys, where relationships develop and change. Maybe a musical like Ordinary Days, which is a quite simple show just set in New York. And I think maybe a character like Deb in that show, who starts off very combative, but eventually softens to some of the people around her. Maybe that's the kind of character journey she would really appreciate and relate to. I think she's going to be someone who loves a character journey. But I think, you know, any of those, you can take your pick. But a musical with a character who really changes, who goes from maybe being an antagonist or a villain or someone imperfect and learns and grows. Or, on the other hand, a musical that is quite intelligent. And there you go. Those are my picks for your favourite musical characters' favourite musicals. Do you have any other characters that I've left off and I need to cover in part 3? Do you have any alternate picks for characters I mentioned in this video? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. And also, I'm kind of thinking about doing this in the other way, so picking musical characters' least favorite musicals. So let me know if that's something you'd like to see as well. If you did enjoy this video, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me, it helps out the channel. Here's some links to some other videos on screen right now, and a link to my Instagram if you'd like to drop me a follow over there. And a huge thank you to all of our channel members on screen right now who help support what I do over here. But that's it for me today, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!